Isabel Carter adjusted her rearview mirror, the city lights of Atlanta fading behind her as she turned onto a quiet residential road. Her emerald green evening dress shimmered faintly under the dim glow of the streetlights. She had just left a charity gala, an event dedicated to raising funds for underprivileged youth. Isabel had spent the evening networking, advocating, and giving her all to a cause close to her heart. But now, all she wanted was to get home to her family. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was her husband, David Carter, the recently appointed chief of police in Fulton County. A tired smile crossed Isabel's lips. Almost home, she murmured, deciding to call him back once she arrived. Then came the sharp flash of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. Isabel's brow furrowed. She hadn't been speeding. She had obeyed every traffic sign. So, why was she being pulled over? Taking a steady breath, she eased her car to the curb and rolled down her window as the officer approached. A tall man with a rigid stance stood by her door, his hand resting on his utility belt. "License and registration," he said flatly, not offering so much as a greeting. Isabel retrieved the documents without hesitation. "Of course, officer. May I ask why I'm being stopped?" The officer barely glanced at her before responding. "We receive a report about a vehicle fitting this description involved in suspicious activity." Isabel's stomach tightened. "Suspicious activity?" she repeated, carefully keeping her tone neutral. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Her grip on the steering wheel tightened. "I don't understand. I haven't done anything wrong." The officer's voice hardened. "Out of the car. Now." Another patrol vehicle pulled up behind the first, its headlights illuminating her car. Two additional officers stepped out, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Isabel hesitated, but knew she had no choice. She unbuckled her seatbelt and slowly opened the door, stepping onto the pavement with her hands visible, just as David had always told her to do in situations like this. "I'm complying," she said evenly, though the pounding of her heart said otherwise. "But I would appreciate knowing why I'm being treated this way." Her calm composure seemed to irritate them. One officer immediately began searching her car, opening the trunk and sifting through the neatly stacked brochures and donation envelopes from the gala. "What's all this?" one of them asked, lifting a pile of pamphlets. "Charity materials," Isabel replied, keeping her voice measured. "I just left a fundraising event." The officer scoffed, tossing them back carelessly. The younger officer, appearing less certain, stepped forward. "Ma'am, are there any weapons, drugs, or illegal items in the car?" A flicker of disbelief crossed Isabel's face. "Absolutely not. And I don't appreciate these baseless accusations." The lead officer shut the trunk with unnecessary force. "We're just doing our job." Her patience was wearing thin. She glanced at her phone, still on the passenger seat, lighting up with another incoming call from David. "May I retrieve my phone to call my husband?" The officers exchanged a quick glance. "No sudden movements," one of them muttered, as if she were a threat. Suppressing her frustration, Isabel carefully reached into the car, retrieved her phone, and dialed David. He answered immediately. "Isabel, are you all right? I've been calling you." She cut him off. "David, I'm pulled over. They're searching my car without cause. I need you here now." There was a brief silence, then David's voice turned sharp. "Where are you?" She rattled off her location, her voice only wavering slightly. "Please hurry." The officers were watching her closely now. They had no idea who she had just called, but the shift in her confidence made them uneasy. Minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. Isabel stood still, refusing to let them see how shaken she was. A few passing cars slowed to gawk at the scene. Then, she heard the hum of an approaching vehicle. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop nearby. The driver's door swung open, and a tall figure emerged. David Carter wasn't a man prone to outbursts. Years of service had taught him the value of control, even in the most tense situations. But seeing his wife standing there, humiliated and surrounded, something inside him burned. Dressed in a crisp navy suit, his police badge clipped to his belt, David exuded authority as he stepped forward. "Good evening," he said smoothly, his voice carrying an edge of steel. "I'm David Carter, Fulton County Chief of Police." Would someone like to explain to me why my wife is being detained and her vehicle searched without cause? The lead officer straightened instinctively. Sir, we received a call about a vehicle matching this description engaging in suspicious activity. David's jaw tightened. Suspicious activity? You mean a woman in an evening dress coming home from a charity gala? You do realize you're talking about Isabel Carter, my wife? The younger officer paled slightly. The lead officer cleared his throat. We weren't aware of her identity, sir. We were just following protocol. David took a step forward, his gaze locking onto the officer. Protocol? His voice remained calm, but the dangerous edge was unmistakable. Since when does protocol involve searching someone's vehicle without probable cause or consent? Did she give you permission to do this? Silence. David let the quiet stretch, watching as the officers shifted uncomfortably. That's what I thought. The lead officer stiffened but didn't argue. Sir, you were just violating her rights, David interrupted, his voice cold. Now, I suggest you wrap up this little fishing expedition before I start making calls you won't like. The officers exchanged nervous glances before muttering a quick, "You're free to go, ma'am." David turned to Isabel, his expression softening just slightly. You okay? She exhaled, nodding. I am now. Without another word, David placed a protective hand on her back and led her toward his SUV. He didn't look back at the officers, didn't dignify them with another glance. They didn't deserve it. As they pulled away, Isabel finally let out the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Tonight had been a reminder, a painful one, of how quickly things could go wrong. But it had also proven something else. In moments of injustice, standing firm mattered. And she would never let anyone take that from her. Not now. Not ever. A growing crowd recorded the flashing police lights illuminating the tense scene. Isabel Carter steadied herself. David, they wouldn't let me make a call. They treated me like a criminal from the start. David's jaw tightened. Do you realize the liability you're creating for this department? You stopped an innocent woman, my wife, without cause. One officer stammered. We were just following protocol. Protocol? David scoffed. Violating rights, denying phone calls, and searching cars without cause? That's not protocol. It's harassment. The murmuring crowd caught every word. The lead officer stepped forward. Chief Carter, let's de-escalate. We can discuss this privately. David let out a humorless laugh. Now you want to de-escalate? You humiliated my wife. We settle this here? The growing crowd whispered. Isabel stood tall beside her husband. David's voice was firm. Call your supervisor. Now. The officer hesitated before making the call. The air thickened with tension. Minutes later, a police SUV arrived. Lieutenant Charles Donovan stepped out, irritation flickering in his eyes. What's happening? He demanded. David didn't wait. Your officers pulled over my wife, searched her car without cause, and denied her a phone call. Explain. Donovan stiffened. Chief, I didn't realize. That's the problem, David cut in. It shouldn't matter who she is. Every citizen deserves respect. Donovan turned to his officers. Did you search her car without cause? The lead officer faltered. We had a report of suspicious activity. Enough, David snapped. Now, because of your actions, this department is under scrutiny. Donovan sighed. I'll handle this internally. David stepped forward. This isn't about internal reviews. It's about public trust. And right now you're failing. Turning to the crowd, he raised his voice. This is why accountability matters. Change starts here. Applause rippled through the onlookers. Donovan shifted. Chief, let's move this privately. David shook his head. No. Transparency happens in public. The officers avoided his gaze. They knew the power had shifted. But this was just the beginning. By morning, the video went viral, sparking outrage. At a press conference, David vowed change. This isn't who we are. Isabel spoke firmly. I wasn't seen as a person, only a problem. Policies shifted, officers faced consequences, and the Carters turned injustice into action. Real change starts with accountability.